She slapped her in the store. Big mistake. A minute later, she was begging the billionaire for mercy. Her manicured hand struck like lightning across Lola's cheek, the sharp crack echoing through the designer boutique. But she had no idea she'd just signed her own professional death warrant. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story. Because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Plaza, one of Chicago's most exclusive shopping districts. The gleaming marble floors reflected the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, while the gentle hum of wealth whispered through every corner of the luxury mall. Here, money didn't just talk, it sang opera. Lola Wesley moved through the corridors with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. Her chocolate skin glowed under the boutique lighting, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo that perfectly complemented her tailored cream dress. At 28, she carried herself with the poise of old money, though her journey to this life had been anything but traditional. She paused outside Bellecourt Designs, admiring a stunning emerald gown in the window display. The price tag, $15,000, didn't make her blink. 3 years ago, it would have represented 6 months of rent in her old neighborhood. Now, it was simply another beautiful thing she could afford, thanks to the man who'd seen past her circumstances and fallen in love with her heart. Mrs. Wesley, the boutique manager, Christine, rushed forward with the practiced enthusiasm reserved for VIP clients. "So wonderful to see you again. I have the perfect pieces set aside for the charity gala next week." Lola smiled warmly. Despite her new status, she'd never forgotten where she came from, and she treated everyone with the same respect she'd once hoped to receive. "You're so thoughtful, Christine. But I'm actually just browsing today. Steve's picking me up in an hour for lunch." The mention of Steve Wesley, Chicago's youngest billionaire and CEO of Wesley Enterprises, sent a visible flutter through Christine. Steve wasn't just wealthy, he was the kind of powerful that shaped skylines and influenced elections. At 35, he'd built an empire that touched everything from real estate to technology, and his influence stretched far beyond Chicago's borders. Meanwhile, across town in the glass towers of the financial district, Steve Wesley stood at the wall of windows in his corner office, his piercing blue eyes surveying the city he'd helped reshape. His tailored charcoal suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, and his dark hair was styled with the casual precision of someone who never had to worry about impressing anyone. "Sir, Mrs. Patricia Cunningham is here for her appointment," his assistant, James, announced through the intercom. Steve's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Patricia Cunningham, CEO of Cunningham and Associates, a mid-tier consulting firm that had been hemorrhaging clients for months. She'd been calling his office relentlessly, practically begging for a meeting about a potential contract that could save her sinking company. "Send her in," Steve replied, though his mind was already on lunch with Lola. These corporate meetings were necessary, but forgettable. His wife, however, was the sunshine that made everything else worthwhile. Back at Meridian Plaza, Patricia Cunningham rushed through the mall corridors, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. She was running late for the most important meeting of her career, and her stress was written across her sharp, angular features. At 52, Patricia had built her reputation on being ruthless in business, but lately, that reputation wasn't enough to keep her company afloat. She clutched her designer handbag, a knockoff she'd bought online but hoped would pass for authentic, and checked her reflection in a store window. Everything had to be perfect. This meeting with Steve Wesley was her Hail Mary, her last chance to secure a contract worth millions. Lost in her anxiety, Patricia didn't watch where she was going as she turned the corner near Bellecourt Designs. The collision was inevitable. "Watch where you're." Patricia's words died in her throat as she took in the young black woman she'd just bumped into. Something about Lola's calm composure and expensive clothing triggered something ugly in Patricia's stressed mind. Lola steadied herself gracefully, her natural instinct to be kind kicking in despite the rudeness. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you all right?" Patricia's eyes narrowed as she took in Lola's designer dress, her elegant jewelry, the quiet wealth that seemed to radiate from every fiber of her being. In Patricia's stress-addled mind, she saw everything that was going wrong with her world. Young people who didn't have to work for what they had, who probably inherited their wealth or married into it without understanding real struggle. "I'm fine," Patricia snapped, brushing off her jacket as if Lola had somehow contaminated it. "Some people need to learn spatial awareness." Lola blinked, taken aback by the hostility. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where respect was earned and given freely, where community mattered more than competition. Even now, surrounded by luxury, she'd never lost that sense of basic human decency. "I apologize again," Lola said gently, her voice carrying the slight melody of her South Side Chicago roots. "I hope your day gets better." Something about Lola's sincere kindness made Patricia's blood boil even more. How dare this girl, this young woman who probably never worked a real day in her life, speak to her with such patronizing sweetness? "Don't," Patricia hissed, stepping closer. "Don't you dare talk down to me like I'm some charity case." The few other shoppers in the area began to notice the commotion. Phones appeared, as they always did these days, ready to capture whatever drama was unfolding. Christine watched nervously from the boutique entrance, recognizing Mrs. Wesley and wondering if she should intervene. Lola's eyebrows furrowed in genuine confusion. I would never. People like you make me sick," Patricia continued, her voice rising. Years of frustration, of watching her business crumble while others seemed to effortlessly succeed, poured out in a torrent of misdirected rage. "Walking around like you own the world, probably never earned a penny of what you're wearing." The accusation hit Lola like a physical blow. People like you. She'd heard those words before, growing up in poverty, working multiple jobs to put herself through college, facing assumptions and prejudices at every turn. Even now, married to one of the most powerful men in America, she still encountered people who looked at her skin color and made assumptions about her worth, her intelligence, her right to occupy the same spaces they did. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Lola said, her voice remaining steady despite the hurt blooming in her chest. "I haven't done anything to you." Patricia laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and cutting in the polished atmosphere of the mall. "Of course you haven't. People like you never think you do anything wrong." The crowd was growing now, a small semicircle of curious onlookers holding their phones at the ready. Christine finally stepped forward, her customer service training warring with her loyalty to one of the boutique's most valued clients. "Is everything all right here?" Christine asked tentatively. "Everything's fine," Patricia snapped without taking her eyes off Lola. "Just having a conversation about entitlement." Lola's patience was wearing thin, but she maintained her composure. She'd learned long ago that responding to ignorance with anger only gave people ammunition to use against you. "I'm going to walk away now," she said quietly. "I hope whatever's troubling you resolves itself." As Lola turned to leave, Patricia's fury reached a boiling point. This girl, this entitled little princess, was dismissing her, walking away like Patricia wasn't worth her time. "Don't you dare turn your back on me," Patricia shouted, her voice echoing through the marble corridors. Lola paused, her hand gripping her purse a little tighter. She'd faced racism before, but rarely so publicly, so viciously. The weight of all those phones pointed in her direction made her skin prickle with anxiety. "Please," Lola said, turning back with one last attempt at de-escalation. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to finish my shopping and leave." Patricia's face twisted with rage. In that moment, all her professional failures, all her financial stress, all her deep-seated prejudices coalesced into a single, destructive impulse. "You want to leave?" Patricia snarled, taking a step forward. "Then maybe next time you'll think twice before." The rest of her words were lost as Lola's phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made her smile despite the tension. "Steve. Running a few minutes early, beautiful. Can't wait to see you. Meeting with some desperate business owner just finished." She was practically begging. "These people have no dignity. See you soon. Love you." Lola's smile was small but genuine as she typed back, "Love you too." Almost done shopping. Patricia saw that smile, and something inside her snapped completely. How dare this girl smile, while Patricia's world was falling apart? How dare she text casually, while Patricia was facing the ruins of her career? The crowd sensed the shift in energy, the way Patricia's stance changed, the way her hands clenched into fists. Someone whispered, "World star," in the background. Another voice said, "This is about to get crazy." Christine took a step forward, finally recognizing the danger. "Ma'am, perhaps we should." "Shut up." Patricia whirled on her, then turned back to Lola with venomous intent. "And you privileged little." The words hung in the air like a loaded gun, and everyone in the crowd held their breath, sensing that whatever happened next would change everything. Lola looked up from her phone, her dark eyes meeting Patricia's pale, furious gaze. In that moment, she saw something that made her heart sink. The same look she'd seen too many times before, the look that reduced her to nothing more than assumptions and stereotypes. "Ma'am," Lola said softly, her voice carrying the weight of generations of women who'd stood in similar moments, "I think you should step back." But Patricia was beyond reason now, beyond thinking about consequences. Her hand was already rising, her face contorted with years of pent-up rage and prejudice. The crowd leaned forward. Cameras focused. The marble floor seemed to hold its breath. And in his office across town, Steve Wesley finished his last call of the day and reached for his car keys, eager to see the woman who'd made his life complete. Time seemed to crystallize in that moment before impact. Patricia's hand hung suspended in the air like a blade about to fall, her manicured nails catching the boutique's soft lighting. The crowd had gone silent except for the soft electronic whir of phone cameras recording, capturing what would become the most expensive mistake of Patricia Cunningham's life. Lola saw it coming, the hatred in Patricia's eyes, the way her lip curled with disgust, the trajectory of that raised hand. She'd seen this look before, in job interviews where she was overqualified, in restaurants where service came slower, in boardrooms where her voice carried less weight until she mentioned her husband's name. But she'd never seen it escalate to physical violence. The slap connected with a sharp crack that echoed through the marble corridors like a gunshot. The sound was wrong, too loud, too final, too real for the polished perfection of Meridian Plaza. It cut through the ambient jazz music, the gentle murmur of luxury shopping, the carefully controlled atmosphere of wealth and refinement. In its wake came a silence so complete that even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Lola's head snapped to the side from the force, her carefully styled hair falling across her face. The sting was immediate and fierce, radiating from her cheek through her jaw and up to her temple. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional shock, the public humiliation, the naked hatred, the reduction of her entire existence to the color of her skin. For a heartbeat, she stood frozen, her hand instinctively rising to her burning cheek. The taste of copper touched her tongue where she'd accidentally bitten it, and she could feel the heat already blooming across her skin. Around her, the crowd stirred with collective gasps and the immediate electronic chirps of social media posts being uploaded. Patricia's hand trembled as she lowered it, her chest heaving with exertion and adrenaline. For just a moment, she looked shocked at her own actions, as if she couldn't quite believe she'd actually done it. But then her face hardened again, her chin lifting with defiant satisfaction. "Maybe that'll teach you some respect," Patricia spat, her voice shaking with residual fury. The words hit Lola like a second slap. Respect. As if Lola had been the one showing disrespect. As if existing while black in an upscale store was somehow an affront that deserved physical retaliation. Lola's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain, but from the overwhelming injustice of it all. She'd worked so hard to build a life where she was valued, where she was safe, where her worth wasn't questioned. And yet here she stood, in one of the most exclusive shopping centers in America, reduced to a victim of someone else's prejudice and rage. You hit me," Lola whispered, her voice barely audible above the increasing murmur of the crowd. Christine finally broke from her shocked paralysis and rushed forward, her face pale with horror. "Oh my God, Mrs. Wesley. Are you hurt? Should I call security? The police? Patricia's face went from defiant to confused at the mention of the name. Wesley, she repeated, something cold beginning to creep into her stomach. But Christine was already pulling out her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed. Security to Bellecourt Designs immediately. We have an assault situation. And someone get Mr. Wesley on the phone. His wife has been attacked. The words hit Patricia like ice water. Wesley. Steve Wesley. The billionaire she'd just finished meeting with. The man whose contract could save her dying company. The most powerful person she'd ever encountered in her professional life. No, this couldn't be happening. What did you say her name was? Patricia asked, her voice suddenly very small. Christine looked at her with barely disguised disgust. Mrs. Lola Wesley. You just assaulted the wife of Steve Wesley. The blood drained from Patricia's face so quickly that she swayed on her feet. The crowd was getting larger now, drawn by the commotion, and she could hear fragments of whispered conversations. Is that really Steve Wesley's wife? Someone's going to jail. Did you get it on video? Oh my God, she's dead. He's going to destroy her. Patricia's knees nearly buckled. Steve Wesley, the man she'd just spent 20 minutes begging for a contract. The man who'd looked at her with cool indifference as she'd pitched her company's services. The man who held her professional future in his hands. That was this girl's husband? No, Patricia breathed, her voice barely a whisper. No. Lola slowly lowered her hand from her cheek, revealing the red mark already blooming across her dark skin. Her eyes, still bright with unshed tears, looked at Patricia with something approaching pity. You didn't know, Lola said quietly, her voice carrying a sadness that went deeper than the physical assault. You just saw a young black woman in an expensive dress and assumed. What? That I didn't belong here? That I needed to be put in my place? Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The magnitude of her mistake was hitting her in waves. Not just the physical assault, not just the moral wrongness of what she'd done, but the complete and utter destruction of everything she'd worked for. Mrs. Wesley, security is on the way, Christine said, her arm protectively around Lola's shoulders. And I've called Mr. Wesley. He's not happy. That was an understatement of astronomical proportions. Christine had never heard Steve Wesley's voice sound like that. Cold as Arctic wind, sharp as broken glass, promising retribution that would be swift and absolute. I want her arrested, Steve had said, his words precise and deadly calm. I want charges pressed. I want her name, her business, her address, everything. And Christine? Make sure everyone with a camera got a good look at her face. I want the whole city to know what she did. Patricia's hands were shaking now, her designer handbag, that pathetic knockoff she'd hoped would impress Steve Wesley, sliding from her trembling fingers to clatter onto the marble floor. Please, she whispered, reaching toward Lola with desperate hands. Please, I didn't know. I was stressed. I was angry about other things I would never have. You would never have what? Lola interrupted, her voice gaining strength despite her tears. Hit me if you'd known I was married to someone powerful. So it would have been okay to assault me if I'd just been some regular person with no connections. The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Patricia had no answer. Because that was exactly what she meant, and they all knew it. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the mall corridor. Multiple sets, moving fast. Security was coming, but more importantly, judging by Christine's sudden straightening of posture and the ripple of recognition through the crowd, someone else was coming too. Steve Wesley moved through the mall like a force of nature, his long strides eating up the marble floors with predatory efficiency. His normally composed features were set in lines of cold fury that made seasoned business rivals think twice about crossing him. Behind him trailed James, his assistant, and 2 members of his personal security team, all of them struggling to keep pace with their boss's urgency. People stepped aside without being asked, some recognizing him from magazine covers and business sections, others simply responding to the aura of barely controlled power that surrounded him like a storm cloud. Store managers emerged from their boutiques, sensing the electricity in the air, the shift in the mall's carefully maintained atmosphere. Steve's piercing blue eyes found Lola across the crowd, and his expression shifted from cold fury to something much more dangerous. The protective rage of a man whose most precious treasure had been threatened. "Lola," he breathed, pushing through the crowd with gentle but implacable force. She turned toward his voice, and the sight of her, his brilliant, beautiful wife with tear tracks on her cheeks and a red handprint blooming across her dark skin, nearly broke something fundamental in Steve's chest. "Baby," he whispered, reaching her in 3 quick strides and immediately cupping her uninjured cheek with infinite tenderness. "Are you hurt? What happened?" His voice was soft, meant only for her, but it carried clearly in the hushed crowd. This was Steve Wesley, the man who controlled billions of dollars, who influenced city policy, who could make or break careers with a phone call, speaking with the gentle concern of a devoted husband. "I'm okay," Lola said quietly, leaning into his touch. "But Steve, who did this?" The question came out with such controlled menace that several people in the crowd took involuntary steps backward. Christine stepped forward, her professional composure barely intact. "Mr. Wesley, sir, it was that woman there, Miss Cunningham. She struck Mrs. Wesley without provocation. We have it all on security cameras, and several people recorded it on their phones." Steve's gaze followed Christine's pointing finger, and when his eyes landed on Patricia Cunningham, the same woman who'd sat in his office less than an hour ago, desperately pitching for a contract that would save her failing business, the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. Recognition flickered across his features, followed by something that made Patricia's blood turn to ice in her veins. "Patricia Cunningham," Steve said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd with the weight of divine judgment. Patricia tried to speak, tried to form words of apology or explanation, but all that came out was a strangled whimper. This was her nightmare made manifest. Not just the end of her business prospects, but the complete annihilation of her professional life. Steve's arm slipped protectively around Lola's waist, pulling her close against his side. The gesture was tender with her, but his eyes never left Patricia's terrified face. "You were in my office 1 hour ago," Steve continued, his tone conversational, but somehow more threatening than any shout could have been. "Begging for a contract, promising that your company represented integrity and professionalism in business partnerships." Each word fell like a hammer blow, and Patricia visibly flinched with every syllable. "And now I find you here," Steve's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to strain to hear him, "assaulting my wife in a public place." The crowd was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something historic. The moment when Patricia Cunningham's life divided into before and after, when her actions created consequences that would ripple through the business community like an earthquake. Steve's phone appeared in his hand with practiced ease, and he began typing with the swift efficiency of someone accustomed to changing lives with digital communications. "James," he said without looking up from his phone, "I want Ms. Cunningham's company thoroughly investigated. Every contract, every client, every business practice. I want to know everyone she does business with." "Right away, sir," James replied, already pulling out his own phone. "And call Richard at the Tribune. I want an exclusive story about what happened here today. Full names, full details. The business community should know exactly what kind of person they're dealing with." Patricia's legs gave out completely, and she sank to her knees on the cold marble floor, her hands clasped in desperate supplication. "Please," she sobbed, her voice echoing off the polished surfaces. "Please, Mr. Wesley, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know who she was." Steve finally looked up from his phone, his expression colder than Arctic wind. "You're sorry you didn't know who she was," he repeated slowly. "Not sorry that you assaulted an innocent woman. Not sorry that you let your prejudice and hatred drive you to violence. You're sorry you hit the wrong person. What do you think Steve should do next? Is there any coming back from a mistake this massive? Share your thoughts on justice versus mercy in the comments." The realization of her words hit Patricia like a physical blow, and she began crying harder, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streams down her cheeks. Around them, the crowd watched in fascination and horror as one of the most powerful men in Chicago prepared to dismantle a woman's entire existence with the same calm efficiency he brought to board meetings. And in the center of it all stood Lola Wesley, no longer the victim of a senseless assault, but a woman protected by love so fierce it could move mountains and topple empires. The storm was just beginning. Within 15 minutes of Steve's first phone call, Patricia Cunningham's world began to collapse with the systematic precision of a controlled demolition. Her phone, which had been mercifully silent in her purse during the confrontation, suddenly erupted with a cacophony of ringtones and notification sounds. Text messages, emails, calls, a digital avalanche that made her hands shake as she fumbled to silence the device. But it was too late. The first notification she saw made her stomach drop to her knees. Breaking. Business owner assaults wife of billionaire Steve Wesley in luxury mall. Exclusive video inside. The headline was from Chicago Business Tribune, and underneath it was a crystal-clear photo of Patricia's hand connecting with Lola's cheek, captured at the exact moment of impact. The timestamp showed it had been published just 7 minutes ago. No, 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 Patricia whispered, scrolling frantically through the dozens of notifications flooding her phone. The story was everywhere, picked up by local news, business journals, social media influencers, even national outlets hungry for a dramatic story about wealth, power, and consequences. Steve watched Patricia's growing panic with the detached interest of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. His arm remained protectively around Lola, who had grown quiet in the aftermath of the assault, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of hurt and disbelief that someone could hate her so completely for simply existing. The security footage has been retrieved, James announced, approaching with his tablet. 17 different angles, plus at least 30 civilian phone recordings. The assault is documented from every possible perspective. Excellent, Steve replied, his voice carrying the same tone he used to discuss quarterly earnings reports. Make sure copies go to the district attorney's office, the civil litigation team, and the media contacts. Patricia's phone rang with a call from her business partner, and she answered with trembling fingers. Patricia, what the hell is happening? The voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I've got clients calling to cancel contracts, investors pulling out, suppliers demanding immediate payment. There's a video of you hitting someone. Tell me this isn't real. Marcus, I can explain. Patricia began, but the line went dead. Immediately, another call came in. Then another. Each conversation was the same devastating pattern. Clients fleeing, partnerships dissolving, professional relationships severing with surgical precision. 20 years of building her business was evaporating in real time. Steve's phone buzzed with an incoming text, and a small, cold smile touched his lips as he read it. Interesting, he murmured to James. The mayor's office is asking if they should revoke Cunningham and Associates City consulting contract. Apparently, they don't want to be associated with this kind of behavior. Patricia heard him and looked up with desperate eyes. The city contract, that's 40% of our revenue. Please, Mr. Wesley, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, Steve interrupted, his voice cutting through her pleas like a blade. I understand that you saw my wife, a woman you'd never met, who had done nothing to you, and decided she deserved to be assaulted because of the color of her skin. That's not, I didn't. Patricia struggled to form a defense that didn't exist. What did you say to her before you hit her? Steve's question was deceptively casual, but there was steel underneath it. Patricia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She couldn't repeat the words. Not here, not in front of this crowd, not with the cameras still recording. I have the audio, James said helpfully, consulting his tablet. Multiple recordings. Would you like me to play them? Please, Steve said with the same tone he might use to request coffee. Patricia's voice crackled through the tablet speaker, tinny but clear. People like you make me sick. Walking around like you own the world, probably never earned a penny of what you're wearing. The words hung in the air like a confession, and several people in the crowd made disgusted sounds. Patricia felt every eye on her, judging her, finding her wanting. People like you, Lola repeated softly, her voice carrying a weight of experience that made everyone listen. You said that to me. What did you mean by people like me, Ms. Cunningham? It was a trap, beautifully laid and perfectly executed. Any answer Patricia gave would either be a lie that could be disproven, or an admission of the racial prejudice that had motivated her actions. I was stressed, I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said, Lola continued, her voice growing stronger. You looked at me and saw someone you thought didn't belong in your world. Someone you thought needed to be reminded of their place. Steve's jaw tightened as he watched his wife speak with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced this kind of hatred before and emerged stronger. He'd fallen in love with her strength, her resilience, her ability to rise above the small-minded cruelty of people who couldn't see past skin color. But knowing she still had to face this kind of treatment, especially when he wasn't there to protect her, made him want to burn the entire world down. Lola, he said gently, you don't have to explain yourself to her. I know, Lola replied, never taking her eyes off Patricia. But maybe she needs to hear it. Patricia's phone rang again, and this time the caller ID made her stomach lurch. Cunningham and Associates reception. Ma'am. Her receptionist's voice was shaky with stress. The office is surrounded by reporters. They're asking about the video, about the assault charges, about Mr. Wesley. What should I tell them? I don't know, Patricia whispered, feeling the walls of her professional life closing in around her. Also, the receptionist continued, I've been fielding calls all morning. 3 of our biggest clients have terminated their contracts effective immediately. The bank called about our line of credit. They want to meet first thing Monday morning. And there's a process server here with legal documents. Patricia's face went white. Legal documents could only mean one thing. Steve Wesley was moving forward with both criminal and civil action. She was going to be arrested, sued, and professionally destroyed, all in one devastating blow. Mr. Wesley, she said, her voice breaking as she struggled to find words that might somehow undo the irreversible. Please, I know what I did was wrong. I know there's no excuse. But I have employees, 15 people who depend on their jobs. I have a daughter in college, a mortgage, responsibilities. Steve's expression didn't soften. You should have thought about those responsibilities before you decided to assault my wife. But they'll suffer for my mistake, Patricia pressed on, grasping at anything that might generate sympathy. Innocent people will lose their jobs because of what I did. Yes, Steve agreed with chilling simplicity. They will. That's what happens when leaders make catastrophic decisions. Everyone under them pays the price. The crowd was completely silent now, watching this real-time lesson in power and consequences. Several people were live-streaming the conversation, and the view counts were climbing into the thousands. Lola touched Steve's arm gently, drawing his attention. Baby, she said quietly, maybe we should go. I just want to go home. Steve's expression immediately softened when he looked at his wife. The cold businessman facade cracked, revealing the devoted husband underneath. Of course, sweetheart. James, bring the car around. But as Steve began to guide Lola away from the scene, Patricia's desperation reached a new level. She stumbled forward on her knees, her designer suit getting dirty on the mall floor, her hands reaching out in supplication. Wait, please, she cried, her voice echoing off the marble walls. There has to be something I can do. Some way to make this right. Steve paused and turned back, his eyes cold as winter sky. Make it right, he repeated. You want to make it right? Patricia nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. Yes, anything. I'll do anything. You can't unmake the choice you made, Steve said with devastating finality. You can't take back the hatred that drove you to put your hands on my wife. You can't undo the fact that you reduced a brilliant, accomplished woman to nothing more than a stereotype in your mind. Each word was like a nail in the coffin of Patricia's professional life, and she felt herself shrinking under the weight of them. But most importantly, Steve continued, his voice growing quieter and somehow more menacing, you can't give me back the sense of safety that Lola should have when she walks through the world. You took that from her today, and that's something I will never forgive. Do you think there's any way Patricia can recover from this disaster? What would you do if you were in her position right now? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Patricia's phone buzzed with yet another notification, and this time the news was even worse. Her company's stock, what little was publicly traded, had dropped 60% in the last hour. Investment firms were pulling out, business partnerships were dissolving, and her professional reputation was being obliterated in real time across every business network in the country. "Mrs. Wesley," Christine approached hesitantly, "the police have arrived. They'd like to speak with you about pressing charges." Lola looked at the police officers approaching through the crowd. Two professionals who clearly recognized the seriousness of dealing with an assault against Steve Wesley's wife. This wasn't going to be brushed under the rug or handled with a simple apology. "Yes," Lola said firmly, her voice carrying the strength of someone who refused to be victimized twice. "I want to press charges. Full charges." Patricia made a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. Criminal charges would mean jail time, a criminal record, the complete destruction of any hope she had of rebuilding her professional life. She'd gone from being a successful business owner to a criminal defendant in the space of 30 minutes. Steve's phone rang, and he glanced at the caller ID with satisfaction. "Richard," he answered, his voice warming slightly. "I assume you received the exclusive materials we sent over?" "Steve, this is incredible," came the voice of Richard Chun, senior editor at the Chicago Business Tribune. "We're running a full exposé tomorrow morning. The video is already viral, over 2 million views in the last hour. This woman's business career is finished." "Good," Steve replied with simple satisfaction. "Make sure the story includes her company's history of discrimination complaints. I'm sure you'll find some interesting patterns if you dig deep enough." Patricia's eyes widened in horror. If they started investigating her company's employment practices, they would find the complaints that had been quietly settled, the patterns of hiring and promotion that favored certain demographics, the culture of casual prejudice that she'd allowed to flourish under her leadership. "No," she whispered, but her voice was lost in the growing commotion as the police officers approached to begin their investigation. Steve Wesley stood in the center of the chaos like the eye of a hurricane, calm, controlled, and absolutely devastating. He'd built an empire by understanding that reputation was everything in business, and he was systematically dismantling Patricia's with the same strategic thinking he brought to hostile takeovers. But more than business calculations, this was personal. Someone had hurt the woman he loved, had tried to diminish her worth, had put hands on her in hatred and violence. And Steve Wesley was not a man who forgot or forgave such transgressions. As the police began to read Patricia her rights, as her phone continued to explode with notifications of her professional destruction, as the crowd of onlookers captured every moment for posterity, one thing became crystal clear. Patricia Cunningham had made the worst mistake of her life, and the consequences were only beginning. The avalanche had started, and nothing could stop it now. The handcuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo through her entire future. The cold metal felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the knowledge that this was just the beginning of her legal troubles. Detective Sarah Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the Chicago PD, had seen plenty of assault cases, but rarely ones that came with this much media attention and political pressure. "Patricia Cunningham," Detective Martinez said with professional efficiency, "you're under arrest for assault and battery. You have the right to remain silent." As the Miranda rights continued, Patricia's eyes darted frantically around the crowd that had grown to nearly 100 people. Store managers, shoppers, security guards, reporters who had materialized as if from thin air, all of them watching her public humiliation with the fascinated horror usually reserved for natural disasters. Steve Wesley stood at the center of it all like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction. His arm remained protectively around Lola, but his eyes tracked every movement, every phone call, every development in Patricia's rapidly unfolding catastrophe with the focused attention of a predator. "Detective Martinez," Steve said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being listened to by people in power. "I trust you have everything you need for a comprehensive investigation?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Wesley," the detective replied with the respectful tone reserved for the city's most influential citizens. We have multiple video angles, dozens of witnesses, and clear evidence of premeditated assault. This is about as solid a case as we see. Patricia's lawyer, summoned by her frantic phone calls, finally arrived, pushing through the crowd with the harried expression of someone who'd spent the drive over watching his client's reputation dissolve on social media. "Don, thank God you're here," Patricia said, her voice breaking with relief. Donald Pierce, a competent if unremarkable attorney, took one look at the scene, the cameras, the crowd, Steve Wesley's cold stare, and immediately understood that this was far beyond his usual corporate law practice. "Patricia, what have you done?" he whispered, pulling her aside as much as the handcuffs allowed. "It was a mistake, a moment of anger. I can explain. There's video, Patricia. It's everywhere. You slapped Steve Wesley's wife in public, unprovoked. There's no explaining that away." Donald's phone buzzed with a call from his law firm's senior partner, and his face went pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Patricia," he said slowly after ending the call, "the firm is. They're concerned about the optics of representing you. This level of media attention, the racial implications, the assault on someone of Mrs. Wesley's stature. You're dropping me?" Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. "You're my lawyer. I'm sorry, but the firm's reputation." "Mr. Pierce," Steve Wesley's voice cut through their conversation like a blade. He approached with the slow, measured steps of someone who held all the power in the room. "I don't believe we've met. Steve Wesley." Donald's hand shook slightly as he accepted the handshake. Being this close to Steve Wesley was like standing next to a barely contained force of nature. The man's presence seemed to fill the space around him with potential energy. "Mr. Wesley, I want you to know that neither I nor my firm condone." "Of course not," Steve interrupted smoothly. "I'm sure you're a reasonable man who understands the gravity of what's happened here. Your client assaulted my wife in a racially motivated attack. The evidence is overwhelming, the media attention is significant, and the legal consequences will be substantial." Each word was carefully chosen, deliberately measured, designed to communicate exactly how hopeless Patricia's situation had become. "Now," Steve continued, "I'm curious about something. Ms. Cunningham was so confident an hour ago when she was in my office, begging for a contract. She spoke about integrity, about her company's values, about being a trustworthy business partner." Donald's face went even paler. "She was meeting with you today?" "Oh yes." Steve's smile was winter cold. "Less than 2 hours ago, she was in my office making presentations about her company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Quite ironic, don't you think?" Patricia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Steve wasn't just prosecuting her assault. He was systematically destroying every aspect of her professional life, revealing the hypocrisy of her business persona, exposing her true character to the world. "Mr. Wesley," Donald said desperately, "perhaps we could discuss a settlement." "There will be no settlement," Steve cut him off with finality. "This goes to trial. Full prosecution, maximum penalties, complete transparency. I want everyone to see exactly what happens when someone puts their hands on my wife." Lola had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion underneath. "Steve," she said gently, touching his arm, "maybe we should let the lawyers handle the legal aspects. I just want to go home." Steve's expression immediately softened when he looked at his wife, the cold businessman facade melting away to reveal the devoted husband beneath. "Of course, baby. But I need you to know, this doesn't end here. She doesn't get to hurt you and walk away." "I know," Lola replied, and there was steel in her voice despite her exhaustion. "But I also need you to know that I'm not going to let her hate change who I am. I'm not going to let this make me smaller." The quiet strength in her words seemed to ripple through the crowd, and several people nodded in appreciation. This wasn't just about wealth or power. This was about dignity, about refusing to be diminished by someone else's prejudice. Patricia watched this exchange with growing desperation. The love between Steve and Lola Wesley was evident in every glance, every touch, every protective gesture. She had attacked not just a random woman, but someone who was deeply cherished by one of the most powerful men in America. Mrs. Wesley, Patricia called out, her voice cracking with desperation. Please, I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm begging you. Please don't let him destroy my life completely. Lola turned to look at her, and Patricia was struck by the intelligence and compassion in those dark eyes. This wasn't the entitled princess Patricia had imagined in her prejudiced mind. This was a woman of substance, someone who had clearly faced adversity and emerged stronger. Ms. Cunningham, Lola said quietly, what you did to me today wasn't about me at all. It was about what you see when you look at someone who looks like me. And that's something you need to work on, regardless of what happens legally. But please, Patricia pressed on, I have employees, people who depend on me. You should have thought about them before you decided to assault someone, Lola replied, her voice remaining steady. Actions have consequences, and those consequences don't just affect the person who makes the choice. Steve's phone rang, and he answered with the brisk efficiency of someone managing multiple crises simultaneously. Richard, what's the latest? He said, stepping slightly away, but remaining close enough to Lola to maintain his protective presence. Steve, this story has gone national, came Richard Chen's voice, loud enough for nearby people to hear. CNN, Fox Business, MSNBC. Everyone's picking it up. The video has over 5 million views now, and it's trending on every social platform. This is bigger than a local news story. This is a cultural moment. Patricia felt her knees wobble. 5 million views. Her face, her moment of hatred and violence, was being watched by millions of people across the country. Her reputation wasn't just destroyed locally, it was annihilated on a national scale. And the business angle is fascinating, Richard continued. We're getting reports that other companies are severing ties with Cunningham and Associates. Stock prices of any company connected to her are dropping. The mayor's office issued a statement distancing themselves from her. This is a case study in how quickly a reputation can be destroyed in the digital age. Steve's satisfaction was visible, though he kept his expression neutral. Excellent work, Richard. Make sure the follow-up stories include the full context. This wasn't just a moment of anger. This was a pattern of prejudice that she's been allowed to hide behind corporate respectability. Patricia's phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the arrest, and now Donald picked it up to check the notifications. His face went white as he scrolled through the messages. Patricia, he said quietly, your business insurance company is dropping you. They're citing the moral turpitude clause in your policy. And the building management company wants to meet about your office lease. Apparently there's a clause about bringing disrepute to the property. That's impossible, Patricia whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was true. Every aspect of her professional life was connected to her reputation, and that reputation was now toxic. Mr. Wesley, Detective Martinez approached. We're ready to transport Ms. Cunningham to the station for booking. The district attorney's office is expediting the charges. They want this handled quickly and transparently. Excellent, Steve replied. Detective, I trust this will be handled with the full seriousness it deserves. Absolutely, sir. Assault cases involving hate crime elements are a priority for our department. Patricia's eyes widened. Hate crime? This wasn't a hate crime. Detective Martinez looked at her with professional skepticism. Ma'am, you assaulted a black woman while making statements about people like her. The DA's office will be reviewing all the evidence, including the audio recordings, to determine appropriate charges. The full scope of her legal jeopardy was becoming clear. This wasn't just a simple assault charge. This could be prosecuted as a hate crime, which carried much more serious penalties and would mark her as a criminal with racist motivations for the rest of her life. Please, Patricia turned to Lola one final time, her voice breaking completely. I know I have no right to ask, but please have mercy. I made a terrible mistake, but I'm not a monster. I was having the worst day of my professional life. I was stressed about money and losing everything, and I took it out on you. It was wrong. It was inexcusable. But please don't let this destroy everything I've worked for. Lola studied Patricia's face for a long moment, and Patricia found herself hoping desperately that she would see some hint of forgiveness, some possibility of redemption. Ms. Cunningham, Lola said finally, you say you're not a monster, but what you did today was monstrous. You didn't just slap me. You tried to put me in what you thought was my place because of the color of my skin. That's not stress, that's hatred. Patricia opened her mouth to protest, but Lola continued. However, she said, and Patricia's heart leaped with hope, I do believe people can change. I believe people can grow and learn from their mistakes. But that growth has to come from genuine remorse, not just fear of consequences. I am remorseful, Patricia said quickly. I'm genuinely sorry for what I did. Are you sorry you hit me? Lola asked quietly. Or are you sorry you hit the wrong person? The question hung in the air like a judgment, and Patricia realized that her answer would determine everything. This was her last chance to show some hint of genuine character, to prove that she was capable of growth and change. But as she opened her mouth to respond, her phone rang with another call from her business partner, and the ringtone seemed to remind her of everything she was losing. Her company, her reputation, her financial security. Patricia started, then stopped, the truth of Lola's question hitting her like a physical blow. She was sorry she'd hit Steve Wesley's wife. She was sorry she'd made such a catastrophic mistake. She was sorry about the consequences. But would she have been sorry if Lola had just been some random black woman with no powerful connections? Would she have felt remorse then? Or would she have justified her actions as teaching someone a lesson? The silence stretched on, and in that silence, everyone present understood Patricia's answer. Lola nodded slowly, sadness rather than anger in her eyes. That's what I thought. Steve's arm tightened protectively around his wife, and his expression hardened into something that promised no mercy, no second chances, no forgiveness. Detective, he said with cold finality, please proceed with the arrest. And make sure Ms. Cunningham understands that this is just the beginning. Civil litigation will follow, and I have a very good legal team. As Patricia was led away in handcuffs, her cries of desperation echoing off the marble walls, the crowd began to disperse. But the damage was done, the consequences set in motion, the avalanche of destruction unstoppable. Steve Wesley had shown the world exactly what happened when someone dared to hurt the woman he loved, and the lesson would be remembered for years to come. Patricia had one last chance to show genuine remorse and failed. Do you think Lola was right to test her motivations? What would true remorse have looked like in this situation? Share your thoughts below. Patricia's voice could be heard calling out desperately as she was escorted through the mall. Please. This will ruin me. I'll lose everything. Please have mercy. But mercy, it seemed, was a commodity that had to be earned through genuine remorse and authentic change. And Patricia Cunningham had failed that final test completely. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Steve Wesley's penthouse office, casting golden patterns across the mahogany conference table where he sat reviewing the latest reports. The view of Chicago spread out beneath him like a kingdom, and in many ways, it was exactly that. His influence touched every corner of the city's business landscape. The Cunningham situation has been fully resolved, James announced, entering with his daily briefing folder. Final bankruptcy filing was submitted yesterday morning. The company's assets are being liquidated to pay outstanding debts. Steve nodded with the satisfaction of a man who had seen justice served. And Ms. Cunningham herself? Sentenced to 18 months in county jail, plus community service and mandatory anger management classes. The hate crime enhancement added significant time to what would have been a simple assault charge. Her lawyer managed to avoid federal charges, but her criminal record is permanently marked. Good. Steve's voice carried no sympathy, no regret. Patricia Cunningham had made her choice in that mall corridor, and now she was living with the consequences of that choice. The civil case was settled yesterday as well, James continued. She agreed to pay damages and issue a formal public apology. Though given her financial situation, collecting on the judgment will be challenging. Steve waved dismissively. The money was never the point. I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences, especially when those actions target someone I love. Through the office's glass walls, Steve could see Lola approaching down the corridor, and his expression immediately softened. Even after 3 years of marriage, the sight of his wife still had the power to transform his entire demeanor from corporate steel to warm affection. Lola entered the office wearing a sharp navy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio, every inch the successful professional she'd become. But Steve could see the subtle changes the incident had wrought. A new confidence in her bearing, a steel in her spine that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Mr. Wesley," she said with a playful smile, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Good morning, Mrs. Wesley," he replied, his voice warming considerably. "How did the meeting go?" "Better than expected," Lola said, opening her portfolio. The Chicago Community Foundation Board voted unanimously to fund the new program. "We'll be able to provide legal advocacy for victims of hate crimes who can't afford representation." Steve felt a surge of pride watching his wife discuss her latest project. The assault had shaken her, certainly, but it had also awakened something powerful. A determination to ensure that other victims wouldn't face their challenges alone. "That's incredible, baby," he said, rising from his chair to kiss her forehead. "How much funding did they approve?" $2 million for the first year, with provisions for expansion if the program proves successful. Lola's smile was radiant. "We're calling it the Dignity Defense Initiative. It'll provide legal representation, counseling services, and community support for hate crime victims." "I'm so proud of you," Steve said, meaning every word. "You've taken something terrible and turned it into something that will help thousands of people." Lola leaned into his embrace, still marveling at how safe she felt in his arms. The incident at the mall had initially made her question her place in their rarefied world, but Steve's unwavering support and fierce protection had ultimately made her feel more secure than ever. "I've been thinking about that day," she said quietly. "About what Patricia said to me, about people like me." Steve's jaw tightened slightly. Even 3 weeks later, the memory of seeing that handprint on his wife's cheek could still trigger protective fury. "What about it?" he asked carefully. "She was right in a way," Lola continued, and Steve started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Not about what she meant. That was pure prejudice and hatred. But there are people like me, people who've faced discrimination, who've been underestimated, who've had to fight for every opportunity. And those people deserve someone fighting for them." Steve studied his wife's face, seeing the passion and determination that had first attracted him to her. "So you're going to be that someone?" "We're going to be that someone," she corrected. "This initiative is going to need significant funding beyond the foundation grant. I was hoping Wesley Enterprises might be interested in a long-term partnership." Steve's business mind immediately began calculating the possibilities. "What did you have in mind?" "A permanent endowment," Lola said, her voice gaining confidence as she outlined her vision. "Enough to make the program self-sustaining. We could expand beyond Chicago, create a model that other cities could replicate. Make sure that no one faces what I faced without having someone powerful in their corner." "You realize that would be a significant financial commitment," Steve said, though his tone suggested he was already sold on the idea. "I realize that," Lola replied with a smile. "But I also know that you once told me you made your fortune to build something meaningful. This could be part of that legacy." Steve was quiet for a moment, considering not just the financial implications, but the broader impact of what his wife was proposing. Then his face broke into a genuine smile. "James," he called to his assistant, "set up a meeting with the Wesley Foundation Board for tomorrow morning. And call our legal team. We're going to need to structure a major charitable initiative." "How major are we talking, sir?" James asked, pulling out his tablet. Steve looked at his wife, seeing the hope and determination in her dark eyes, and felt that familiar surge of love and pride that never seemed to diminish. $50 million, he said without hesitation. "To start." Lola's eyes widened. "Steve, that's incredibly generous, but you don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "Patricia Cunningham tried to make you smaller, tried to diminish your worth, tried to put you in what she thought was your place. The best response to that kind of hatred is to become even more powerful, even more influential, even more capable of protecting others." James was already typing notes into his tablet, accustomed to his boss making multi-million-dollar decisions with the same casual ease that others might choose lunch. "Sir, this will generate significant media attention," James noted. "Are you prepared for the questions about the connection to the assault case?" "Let them ask," Steve replied firmly. "I want everyone to know that when someone tries to hurt my wife, the response isn't just punishment, it's transformation. Lola is going to do more good with this program than Patricia Cunningham did harm with her hatred." Lola felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by her husband's unwavering support and the magnitude of what they were about to undertake together. "There's something else," she said, reaching into her portfolio for another document. "I've been invited to speak at the National Civil Rights Convention next month. They want me to talk about turning personal trauma into community action." Steve's pride was evident in every line of his face. "That's a huge honor, baby. You'll be amazing." "I'm nervous," Lola admitted. "It's one thing to talk to foundation boards in Chicago, but this will be national media, thousands of delegates, people who've been fighting these battles much longer than I have." "You belong on that stage," Steve said with complete conviction. "You have something important to say, and people need to hear it." As if to underscore his point, James looked up from his tablet with a satisfied expression. "Mrs. Wesley, I've just received confirmation that your speech has been scheduled as the convention's keynote address. They're expecting the largest attendance in the convention's history." Lola took a deep breath, feeling the weight of opportunity and responsibility settling on her shoulders. 3 weeks ago, she'd been the victim of a hate crime. Now she was becoming a voice for justice and change. "I want to invite Patricia Cunningham to attend," she said suddenly. Both Steve and James looked at her in surprise. "Lola," Steve said carefully, "she's in county jail." "I know, but she'll be released in a year, and when she gets out, she's going to need to rebuild her life. Maybe hearing about how we turned her hatred into something positive might help her understand the real impact of her actions." Steve studied his wife's face, seeing the compassion and wisdom that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. Even after being attacked, even after being humiliated and hurt, she was still thinking about redemption and healing. "You want to offer her a chance at redemption," he said. "I want to offer her a chance at education," Lola corrected. "Redemption is something she'll have to earn herself." James cleared his throat diplomatically. "Mrs. Wesley, given the legal restrictions and security concerns, arranging for Ms. Cunningham to attend might be complicated." "Then we'll live stream it to the county jail," Lola said with determination. "If she wants to watch, she can. If she wants to learn something from this, the opportunity will be there." Steve shook his head in amazement. 3 weeks ago, that woman slapped you and called you names. Now you're offering her a masterclass in how to turn hatred into hope. "That's who I am," Lola said simply. "That's who you married. I can't let someone else's hatred change that." Steve crossed to where his wife sat and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I love you," he said with quiet intensity. "I love your strength, your compassion, your refusal to let the world make you bitter. I love that you can take the worst moment of your life and transform it into something that will help thousands of people." "I love you too," Lola replied, leaning forward to kiss him softly. "And I love that when someone tried to hurt me, your response wasn't just to protect me. It was to give me the resources to protect others." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both understanding that the incident at Meridian Plaza had fundamentally changed their relationship. Not by weakening it, but by revealing depths of love and partnership they hadn't fully appreciated before. "James," Steve said finally, "clear my calendar for the rest of the day. Mrs. Wesley and I have some planning to do." "Of course, sir. Should I reschedule the Peterson meeting?" "Reschedule everything," Steve replied, never taking his eyes off his wife. "Today is about building something that matters." As James left to rearrange the day's appointments, Steve helped Lola gather her materials, both of them energized by the scope of what they were about to undertake. "You know," Lola said as they prepared to leave the office, "in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for what happened." Steve's expression darkened slightly. "Grateful? Not for the assault itself," she clarified quickly, but for what it revealed. About us, about our strength together, about the platform we have to make real change. Patricia Cunningham thought she was putting me in my place, but what she actually did was show me exactly where my place is. Fighting for justice, using our resources to protect people who can't protect themselves. Steve smiled, understanding dawning in his eyes. She thought she was diminishing you, but she actually empowered you. Exactly. And now thousands of other victims will benefit from that empowerment. As they walked through the corridors of Wesley Enterprises, employees nodded respectfully to both of them, but there was something new in their expressions when they looked at Lola. A recognition that she wasn't just the boss's wife anymore, but a force for change in her own right. Mrs. Wesley, called David Kim, one of the company's junior executives, I just wanted to say how excited everyone is about the Dignity Defense Initiative. My sister was the victim of a hate crime in college, and having legal advocates would have made all the difference. Thank you, David, Lola replied warmly. That's exactly why we're doing this, so no one has to face these challenges alone. As they continued toward the elevator, Steve reflected on how completely the narrative had changed. 3 weeks ago, Patricia Cunningham had thought she was teaching his wife a lesson about knowing her place. Instead, she had unleashed something far more powerful than she could have imagined. The combined force of love, resources, and determination focused on justice. One more thing, Lola said as they entered the elevator. I want to establish a scholarship program too, for young people from underserved communities who want to study law or social justice. Steve laughed, shaking his head in admiration. Is there anyone in Chicago you're not going to help? I'm just getting started, Lola replied with a grin that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. As the elevator descended toward the parking garage where their car waited, Steve reflected on the events of the past 3 weeks. Patricia Cunningham had lost everything. Her business, her reputation, her freedom, her future. But in destroying herself, she had inadvertently created something beautiful and powerful. Lola Wesley had emerged from victimhood to become a champion for others. The assault had been meant to diminish her, but instead it had revealed the full scope of her strength and compassion. And their marriage, already strong, had been forged into something unbreakable by the test of crisis and the shared commitment to justice. Lola transformed her trauma into a force for positive change. Have you ever seen someone turn a terrible experience into something that helps others? What does it take to choose hope over bitterness? Share your thoughts on resilience and transformation in the comments below. The elevator doors opened to reveal their waiting car, and as Steve helped his wife into the passenger seat, he couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. Patricia Cunningham had thought she was slapping a woman who didn't know her place. Instead, she had awakened a force that would reshape the lives of thousands of people for generations to come. And in trying to tear down love, she had only made it stronger. As they drove away from Wesley Enterprises toward their next meeting, the first planning session for what would become the most comprehensive victim advocacy program in the nation, Steve reached over to take his wife's hand. I love you, Mrs. Wesley, he said simply. I love you too, Mr. Wesley, she replied, squeezing his hand. Now let's go change the world. And together, they did exactly that. 3 weeks after Patricia Cunningham thought she could put Lola Wesley in her place, the world discovered exactly where that place really was. At the forefront of justice, powered by love, and absolutely unstoppable. The slap that was meant to diminish had instead ignited a movement. And love, as it always does, had conquered all.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.